Birnhack is an expert in copyright law. He's co-director of the Haifa Center of Law and Technology and one of the organizers of this wonderful conference. And he will talk to us about copyright and speech.
Thank you, Shulamit. As I will be trying to do this. Just a second, please. Magic. And I believe I need this. In the next 15 minutes, I would like to tie some of the loose ends. Perhaps some of them are loose and some of them are not loose at all. And perhaps to correspond with a session earlier today that discussed human rights, mostly in the context of patent law, I would like to bring in human rights, free speech into copyright law. And I believe it also has to do with cultural preservation and the very interesting process of glocalization that Dr. Ram spoke about, and also issues of how copyright affects local identity or identities, either individual or group identities that Professor Lavie discussed. And I believe, I hope it will also help Avigdor Feldman later on. Okay, it's on. In a nutshell, I would like to draw or discuss two main issues and then tie them. The first is the conflict, or as I will show later on, or as I will argue later on, the denial of the conflict between copyright law and free speech jurisprudence. I will then look at copyright law and discuss its globalization process, and then I will tie it together, saying or arguing that free speech, which is mostly local, can serve as a glocalization force in the face of globalization of copyright law. I hope this will make sense in a few minutes. Okay, let us begin. I know that Avigdor Feldman later on will show you something to do with ducks, so I thought I will steal the show and show you these two things, which are taken from Documentia, which is some German website. I'm not sure it's the best of all arts, but it's, you know, this is Donald Che, or Che Duck, or whatever. And for those who do not speak Spanish, I was told that it says freedom to the ducks, yeah. Okay, to the ducks. And this is the Mona, Donald, Lisa, Duck, whatever. Okay, I will go back to them later on in a few seconds. These two, are just examples of the conflict, in my eyes, of the conflict between copyright law and free speech. The conflict is very simple to state, very difficult to grasp. The conflict is that I cannot speak what you own, you being anyone else who owns a valid copyright to something. That is one example, the Donald Che Guevara, Mona Lisa, etc. Cultural appropriation, about which we've heard, is another case in which copyright law often conflicts or is in conflict with free speech or practices of free speech in a broader manner. Parody, satire, critical sequels, The Wind and Gone, or Chassamba for the Israelis. We had a very similar case to The Wind and Gone over a very famous and sort of book that all of the Israelis grew up reading, that book, Chassamba. The issues of sampling, postmodernist art, and anything else. Basically, all the time, we act like the creators of the Donald Duck Che Guevara, perhaps in more or less sophisticated manners. I believe that we all quote, cite, we all use speech of other people, whether we do that deliberately, whether we do that inadvertently. We lawyers cite all the time that there's this unfortunate convention that law reviews have to have millions, gazillions, and millions of footnotes. Otherwise, they are not scientific in the eyes of the students who edit the law reviews, at least in the United States. However, or not however, this practice, so I believe, in which each of us keeps mixing, copy-pasting, mixing, burning, whatever, and creating our own mixture, all this is part of the process in which we create knowledge. We heard one version from Professor Hagit Mesoyaron earlier about how basic science is created. This is how basic speech is created, whether it's elite speech or just colloquial daily speech. We have this notion which we often hear in IP scholarship about bricks. Each of us lays her or his brick on top of the bricks already there. That is true of copyright, that is true of patent law, that is true of innovation in general, and that is summed up in the on the shoulders of giants. That's the OTSOG, what it stands for. On the shoulder of giants. If you're a midget standing on a shoulder, I always wondered about that one because it depends how big the midget is, the dwarf is. If you stand on the shoulder of a giant, you see further away than the giant herself or himself. So sometimes we have a clash between copyright law and free speech. Here are two examples. I'm not sure at all how these cases would have played either in US law. And for those of you who would say, oh, this is fair use, I would like to remind you of the Air Pirates case back in the 1970s, which featured Mickey Mouse on a plane, a bit stoned, and the content was Mickey Mouse engaging with Minnie in some adult activity. And you cannot find that magazine of the 1970, and I'm not sure at all how this would feature in Israeli law, as Avigdor will probably tell us later on about his favorite Israeli Donald Duck, whatever. So in these cases, copyright law wins, or seems to win, and being a legal realist, just the fact that a lawyer cannot give a positive response, whether this is copyright infringement or fair use or fair dealing or something or some other exception, this in itself is a major has a major chilling effect over speech. Now, go to courts and argue that there's a conflict between copyright law and free speech. They will throw us out of the court. There's a continuous denial of this conflict, which goes on in the US for the last 34 or 5 years, and in many other courts. And the responses vary. Some people say, well, copyright law, free speech, these are two separate, different categories, legal categories. This is one drawer, this is another, they have nothing to do with each other. Some would say, the Europeans would like this sort of explaining the situation. Copyright law applies to the private sphere, to the horizontal level. This is between me and another citizen or another corporation, whereas free speech is a matter between a citizen and the government. Two separate spheres have nothing to do with each other. In the United States, they have the Constitution, and they have a very prominent document, obviously, and they would say, well, both the free speech, the First Amendment and the copyright clause, they are both in the Constitution. In the amendment Constitution, okay, they did not repeal each other. The structure of the Constitution as a Constitution and an amendment, the history of the Constitution, the framers saw no problem. Or in the words of the US Supreme Court, copyright law, or they say that in the Harper and Row, the framers, I'm paraphrasing, the framers thought that copyright law is the engine of free speech. So, after studying a lot of cases, we can conclude that when an argument is made about an external conflict between one body of law, copyright law, and another, free speech jurisprudence, which is an argument about an external conflict on the constitutional level, we see that courts routinely internalize this argument. They take it within copyright law. And they do that in two different ways, both in the US and in Europe and in Israel and anywhere else. One way is a substantive internalization. It is argued, or so the courts say, including in the recent Eldred case, that copyright law and free speech have a goal, each has a goal, and it's the same goal. They share the same goal, hence they are tied together in the most important point, the whole purpose. This is the idea that copyright is the engine of free speech. At the same time, in the US and separately in other jurisdictions, we meet what will be called mechanical internalization. Courts say, okay, we acknowledge that on a theoretical level there's a conflict between copyright law and free speech, but it has already been taken care of. It has already been taken care of by the Parliament, Congress, the relevant legislature, and the balance has already been achieved. And look at copyright law. It has fair use or fair dealing. It has built-in exceptions. We have the idea-expression dichotomy, which allows copyright only over expressions and not over ideas. And we have some other exceptions and defenses, which all have a common goal. They all take care of free speech concerns. Now, all this is very nice. It can be criticized on every single point of this argument can be criticized. But if we take this denial seriously, if we accept what courts say, either on the substantive level or on the mechanical level, then when we design and redesign and interpret and reinterpret and shape copyright law to its very fine details, we have to take into consideration free speech concerns, because courts tell us either that they share the same goal or that free speech concerns have already been taken into account. Let's leave this aside for a couple of minutes and look at copyright law. Copyright law is going global. We all know this by now, either through TRIPS or WCT, the WIPO Copyright Treaty, or through bilateral instruments. And I wanted to bring a list of countries which changed their copyright laws in line of this global regime just in the last year. And I used the appendix of the Special 301 of report of 2004, and it was so long that I realized that I will need to spend a few slides, so I just gave it up, so you will have to trust me. The fact that copyright law is going global doesn't mean that it's harmonized, as discussed yesterday. Copyright still is implemented locally on within a territory, and it might vary. It might vary. The requirement of originality is interpreted differently in the UK, the US, Canada, Israel, or other places. Fair dealing in the UK and fair use in the United States and fair dealing, fair use in Israel, it's not the same. They have some common features, some common ideas, but the details of the rules are different. So we have something which is a legal mechanism which is going global and imposed global in the terms that Uri proposed earlier. It's international bodies and strong industrialized countries which impose their copyright regime or their idea of what copyright law is. It's implemented locally. We'll jump and return. This global local situation causes many clashes. I will not go over these, but Professor Smadar-Lavin mentioned some of those global local clashes. Where the global meets the local, it doesn't always fit. And there's been a lot of work done on how Western conceptions of copyright law, of the creative process, are imposed on local cultural modes of production. There's a lot of soft nationalism going on. Israeli government has always wanted to promote Israeli, Hebrew, Jewish culture. The French like their language and they like the culture, and I'm sure the Americans like their culture as well and would like to promote it. The NEA is a way to promote culture. Let's look at the nature of copyright law when it goes global. It's very strange. It's void of theory. As we've heard again and again over the last 2 days and discussed it, copyright law and IP in general have become an issue of trade, not of IP. You know, we forgot, as Rochelle mentioned earlier, we forgot that TRIPS is also an IP issue. You know, it's been portrayed and sold and debated and discussed and considered as a trade issue. I would like to refer you to those of you who were yesterday when we heard Yair Shiran and Minister Olmert of the Ministry of Trade. They mentioned a lot of considerations regarding whether to adopt a certain patent, in their case, patent law. The theory of patent or IP was never there. It was all about, you know, the Americans tell us to do that, and we have a big company over here that we want to make sure it stays here, etc., etc. What is the theory of this global copyright law? Is it the incentive theory? Is it Posner and Landes? Is it the just rewards? Is it Locke? Is it Hegel? Who stands behind this global copyright regime? It is void of theory. We could have thought that it's neutral. It's not neutral. It has a philosophy. It's a philosophy of globalization. Philosophy of globalization means simply that the strongest kid on the block gets to say what the other kids do and how they behave. Free speech, however, is local. Free speech is local because free speech is still considered in most places, perhaps maybe not in the US, as a matter of politics first and trade secondly. As long as that is the situation, free speech jurisprudence will remain local. And when courts or constitutions or legislatures or whoever designs local free speech jurisprudence, they take into account local history, national ideas. There's a very famous, the most famous Israeli case on free speech from 1953, in which Justice Shimon Agonat wrote, the quote you see here, it is a well-known axiom that a nation's law must be studied through the prism of its national life system. Of course, he said that after he extensively quoted from US law. There's over 30 pages of American law, free speech jurisprudence there. So, to sum up, what do we have here? We have copyright that is said, that is the first line of the discussion. If we take the denial of the conflict between free speech and copyright law seriously, so copyright law has embedded in it ideas of free speech. That is one third. A second third, copyright law is going global. Free speech still is, and I predict that it will remain that way, despite some European ideas of the European Convention of Human Rights, etc. It will remain local. So, free speech has the potential of mitigating the global forces. When the global copyright will meet the local free speech jurisprudence, there we have a scene of globalization, quite different from the falafel issue, but nevertheless a place where the global meets the local. And now it might turn out to be a good idea in some countries. Countries that have a strong free speech jurisprudence will manage to preserve their local culture, their local identity, and with local identities of its members. But many countries that now join this global regime do not have a strong free speech jurisprudence. The First Amendment of the United States is unique. No other country that I know of has that strong a regime of free speech. And of course, the first to deny that there's a conflict between copyright law and free speech are the Americans with the strongest free speech regime. So free speech can be a source of positive local agenda meeting the very strong global forces, but for those countries who do not have it, they will wake up one day and ask, where has our culture gone to? And that might be too late. Thank you.